this video, we will see how we can build and run a Balek instance using Docker Compose. In preparation for this video, I have created a fresh Google Cloud Compute instance, running their container-optimized operating system with a 20 GB image. The standard 10 GB doesn't seem to be enough space for the containers we are going to build. I also configured it to allow HTTP and HTTPS traffic. Balek only uses port 443, but to get a certificate, we will be using port 80. I have also added my public key to the new server and created a DNS entry so we can log into the server with the SSH command from our terminal pointed to the new host. Having a DNS entry pointing to the new host will also allow us to retrieve domain certificates from Let's Encrypt using certbot after we get the instance built. First thing I do after logging in is add Docker Compose as an alias to the .bashrc file. Then run source ~bashrc to load the alias into the current bash session. Running Docker Compose now with the -v argument should print out the version to the terminal. The first time it runs, Docker will have to download the images it needs for Composer. Now, let's download the Balek repository by issuing the following command. This will download the Dojo Toolkit source repositories as well. Once this is finished, we enter the Balek root directory. Inside is a builds directory, which contains the default Balek build configuration and the Digivisual Guestbook module build configuration. Each build configuration contains a Docker file and a docker compose.yml file for building the containers needed by the build. Each build also contains a configuration directory which gets used by Balek when it is ran. In the configuration directory is a config.json file used to configure the server and a certificate directory which contains the SSL certificates for the server. The repo came with a self-signed certificate that we will be replacing once we get our instance up and running. We enter this command to build the default Balek instance. This builds the Docker containers, then installs and builds Balek into the main container. Once this is finished, we can bring up the database containers and run Balek with the following command. We can now visit the instance using the HTTPS protocol, pointed to the domain name or the IP address of the server. For this demonstration, we use the following address. If we do not use HTTPS, the connection will fail. If working as expected, you should see a "Connection is not secure" browser dialog with the option to trust the default signed certificate. I have already accepted the risk, so the certificate shows valid in my browser. However, we see that it is the self-signed certificate, and this is not what we want. So let's see how we add a certificate from Let's Encrypt using the certbot Docker container. Back to the SSH session in the home directory, let's enter this command. You can replace the directory paths and domain names with your own, as long as the DNS record for the address points to the server IP. Certbot uses port 80 to verify with Let's Encrypt, so it can be ran while Balek is running, though we will have to restart Balek to reload the new certificate once we copy it to the build directory. We used the dry run argument to test before really asking for the certificate. Let's actually get the certificate now by removing this argument and running the command again. Now that we have our domain certificate and key, let's move them to the build configuration directory. But first, let's change ownership of the certificate directory so our user can move them. Then copy the certificates to the build configuration directory using the following commands. Now we enter the Balek root directory and restart the containers. Reloading the browser and checking the certificate, we see that our connection is secure and our certificate's valid. Using this method is probably the simplest way to get an instance up and running. As we continue to develop and automate the build process, we are looking to allow Balek to build and deploy itself to a remote server from an installed instance. To access the built and minified client, add \release to the end of your address. A future feature of the build system is to make the release directory the site index when in production mode. If you would like to try them out yourself, you can find the commands used in this video in the README of the repository. Thanks for watching.